Have you ever wondered why you decided to heal and now feel like your life is more chaotic than before? Why does every therapy session seem to open deeper wounds instead of closing them? If you're here, it's because you've discovered a brutal truth no one warned you about. Sometimes healing hurts much more than the original wound. And today, we're going to discover why this isn't just normal, but absolutely necessary for your transformation. A few years ago, I met a woman who had been in therapy for 3 years. She told me something that shocked me. Before I started healing, at least I knew who I was. Now, I feel like a stranger in my own life. This phrase encapsulates one of the most uncomfortable truths about personal growth that Carl Jung understood better than anyone. The process of becoming who you really are isn't a smooth, linear evolution. It's a complete demolition, followed by a painful and necessary reconstruction. Jung said we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that darkness, when you finally look it in the face, can be so overwhelming that you miss the days when you lived in denial. At least then you slept at night without questioning everything about yourself, your family, your relationships, your life decisions. But here's the truth that will change your perspective forever. The pain of healing isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're finally doing something real. For years, decades even, you've built an emotional survival system based on defense mechanisms, behavioral patterns, and beliefs that kept you functioning, but not living. And now that you decide to dismantle that system, your psyche panics. Imagine you've lived your entire life in a house with cracked foundations. The house wobbles, has leaks, doors don't close properly, but it's your house, it's familiar. You know exactly where all the problems are and how to avoid them. One day, you decide to renovate completely. The first step is demolishing the rotten walls, removing the damaged foundations. For months, your house is a total disaster. There's nowhere to sleep comfortably, everything is full of dust, nothing works like before. You wonder if it wasn't better to live with the leaks. This is exactly what happens when you decide to heal emotionally. Your life temporarily becomes a construction zone. And the pain you feel isn't the pain of being broken. It's the pain of being rebuilt from the foundations. Jung called this process individuation, the path toward becoming your true self, not the version you created to survive in a world that wasn't safe for your authenticity. The first major blow comes when you realize you have to stop blaming others for your unhappiness. For years, your suffering had names and faces: your parents, your ex-partner, your boss, circumstances. It was painful, yes, but it was also simple. There were clear villains in your story. But when you start healing, you have to face a devastating truth. You've also been complicit in your own suffering. Jung spoke of projection as one of the most primitive mechanisms of the human psyche. We project onto others what we can't see or accept in ourselves. It's easier to say my mother is controlling than to admit I also have controlling impulses that terrify me. It's more comfortable to state my partner is emotionally distant than to recognize I also use distancing as a protection mechanism. When you begin to withdraw these projections, when you start seeing your own shadow reflected in those you've judged, the world shakes. You can no longer sustain the simple narrative of victim versus villain. You realize you're a complex human being, capable of both love and cruelty, both generosity and selfishness. And this complexity is unbearable for a mind that was accustomed to the simplicity of judgment. Have you noticed how when you start therapy, suddenly everyone around you seems to resist your change? It's not coincidence. Your healing process threatens the balance of your entire family and social system. For years, you've played a specific role, the one who always helps, the one who never says no, the one who absorbs everyone's emotions, the one who maintains peace at the cost of their own tranquility. When you decide to heal, you automatically decide to stop playing that role. And this creates a vacuum in the system that makes everyone uncomfortable. Your family might accuse you of being weird or different. Your friends might distance themselves because you're no longer the same emotional container as always. Your partner might feel insecure because you no longer tolerate the same behaviors as before. This is one of the most intense pains of the healing process. You realize that some of the people you love can't love the healed version of you. They're too comfortable with your wounded version because it was predictable, controllable, functional for their own emotional needs. Jung understood that individual growth always disturbs relational systems. You can't change without everything around you being forced to change too. And here comes the exercise that will change your perspective. The next time someone tells you that you've changed a lot since you started therapy, instead of defending yourself or justifying, simply respond, "Thank you for noticing." That external resistance is confirmation that you're on the right path. If your growth doesn't make anyone uncomfortable, you're probably not growing enough. But the real pain begins when you have to face your own shadow. Jung defined the shadow as all those aspects of ourselves we've repressed, denied, or rejected because they don't fit the image we want to project. For decades, you've built an identity based on, "I am a good person." But what happens when you realize you also have capacity for cruelty, manipulation, selfishness? The shadow isn't evil, it's simply human. But recognizing it is devastating because it destroys the heroic narrative you had about yourself. You realize you've judged in others exactly what you deny in yourself. That you've been hypocritical without knowing it. That you've hurt people while believing you were only protecting yourself. One of my clients once told me, "I realized I'm exactly like my mother in the ways I most detest." This realization plunged her into deep depression for months, because she not only had to process the pain of being hurt by her mother, but also the pain of recognizing that she had perpetuated those same patterns with her own children. Jung knew that integrating the shadow is perhaps the most difficult work a human being can do. It means stopping being the hero of your own story and becoming a complex, three-dimensional character, capable of both goodness and error. It means accepting that you can love deeply and also hurt deeply, sometimes the same people. The shadow integration exercise begins with this brutal question: what do you judge most in other people? Write it down, and then ask yourself with total honesty, in what way do I also have this characteristic? The resistance you feel to answering this question is proportional to the size of the shadow you're avoiding facing. If you're here with me after these first few minutes, give this video a like and subscribe, because what's coming now is even deeper. We're going to delve into the most devastating pain of all: the death of your false identity. All your life you've been someone. You have a personality, a set of characteristics that define who you are. Maybe you're the strong person in the family, the one who always has answers, the one who never gets angry, the perfectionist, the savior of others. This identity has given you purpose, made you feel special, necessary, valued. But when you start healing, you realize that much of this identity was built as a response to trauma, not as an expression of your true essence. That unshakable strength that everyone admires in you is actually armor you developed because showing vulnerability wasn't safe in your family of origin. That compulsive need to help others is actually a way to avoid facing your own pain. Jung called this the persona, the mask we use to be accepted in the world. And while this mask was necessary to survive, it also became a prison. You've identified so much with the role you play that you've forgotten who you are when you're not playing it. The process of removing the mask is terrifying because you're temporarily left without identity. You no longer know who you are if you're not the strong one, the responsible one, the one who always has everything under control. It's like being an actor who has played the same character for so long that when they finally remove the costume, they don't recognize their own face in the mirror. This identity crisis can last months, even years. You wake up each day feeling like a stranger in your own life. The things that used to define you no longer make sense, but you still don't know what will come in their place. It's like being in an emotional limbo where you're no longer who you were, but you don't know who you're becoming either. One of the most disorienting experiences is when people around you start saying you've changed a lot, that you're not the same anymore. And they're right, you're not the same, but you don't know who you are now either. It's as if you've died emotionally but are still physically alive. Jung understood that this process of psychological death and rebirth is essential for growth, but he also recognized it's one of the most terrifying experiences a human being can live. Have you noticed that since you started therapy, you feel like you don't fit anywhere? Not in your family, not in your group of friends, not even with yourself. This feeling of not belonging is temporary, but while you're living it, it feels eternal. It's the price of choosing authenticity over comfort, growth over stability. The exercise for navigating this identity crisis is learning to be comfortable with not knowing who you are temporarily. Each day, instead of asking yourself, "Who am I?" ask yourself, "What am I feeling right now?" Instead of seeking to define yourself, seek simply to experience yourself. Authentic identity isn't built, it's discovered. And it can only be discovered in the stillness of not having to be anyone in particular. But perhaps the sharpest pain of the healing process is the loneliness that comes with growth. When you start establishing healthy boundaries, saying no without guilt, withdrawing from toxic relationships, you realize how few people in your life really knew you or valued you for who you are. Jung spoke of the individuation process being inherently solitary, not because you have to push everyone away, but because very few people are willing to accompany you at the level of depth and honesty that true growth requires. Most relationships are based on functional roles, not authentic connection. When you stop being functional for others, when you no longer play the role of savior, emotional container, the person who always says yes, many relationships simply fade away. And you realize that what you thought was love was actually emotional dependence. What you thought was friendship was actually mutual convenience. This revelation is brutal. You face the fact that you've been surrounded by people but have been essentially alone for years. You've been so busy being what others needed that you never gave yourself the chance to be known and loved for who you really are. The loneliness of growth is different from any other loneliness. It's not the loneliness of having no one. It's the loneliness of finally knowing yourself and realizing that very few people have had real access to your true being. It's the loneliness of having superficial conversations when what your soul yearns for is deep connection. But here's the unexpected twist. This loneliness, though painful, is also sacred. It's in this loneliness where you can finally hear yourself without the interference of others' expectations. It's where you can cry without having to comfort yourself immediately. It's where you can feel your pain without having to explain it to anyone. Jung understood that this phase of isolation isn't permanent, but it's necessary. It's like the cocoon where the caterpillar completely dissolves before becoming a butterfly. For a time, you're neither caterpillar nor butterfly. You're something undefined, vulnerable, in the process of transformation. The exercise for this stage is learning to be your own company. Instead of fleeing from loneliness by filling it with distractions, superficial relationships, or compulsive activities, allow yourself to feel it completely. Sit with it as if it were a friend visiting. Ask it what it has to teach you. The loneliness of growth isn't a void to be filled. It's a sacred space where your true identity is born. And now we come to the deepest point of this process, what Jung considered the true test of fire, learning to live with the paradox of being human. When you start healing, you realize you're neither completely good nor completely bad. You're neither totally strong nor totally vulnerable. You're neither absolutely wise nor completely ignorant. You're all of this at once, and your mind, accustomed to simple categories, goes into crisis. It wants you to be one thing or the other. It wants clarity, definition, labels. But the reality of being human is that we're complex systems capable of simultaneous contradictions. You can deeply love someone and at the same time be furious with that person. You can be tremendously generous in some areas of your life and completely selfish in others. You can have profound wisdom about certain topics and be completely blind to other aspects of yourself. This complexity is unbearable for a mind that was trained to think in terms of black and white. During the healing process, you have to learn to live in the grays, to hold multiple contradictory truths about yourself without going crazy. Jung said the mark of a mature mind is the ability to hold two opposite ideas at the same time without either one canceling out the other. But developing this capacity is exhausting. Your brain constantly struggles to categorize, to simplify, to return to the comfort of absolute definitions. One of the most difficult paradoxes to accept is that you can be responsible for your healing without being guilty of your trauma. You can recognize your role in toxic dynamics without denying that you were a victim of abuse. You can forgive without forgetting, love without trusting, be strong without being invulnerable. The exercise for integrating paradoxes is the practice of yes and, instead of I'm good or bad, you practice I'm good and I also have capacity for cruelty. Instead of my mother hurt me or loved me, you practice my mother hurt me and also loved me in the only way she knew how. This practice frees you from the tyranny of having to be consistent all the time. As we move toward the end of this journey, I want you to understand something fundamental. The pain of healing isn't evidence that you're going backward. It's evidence that you're going deeper. Each layer of consciousness you develop comes accompanied by a new layer of pain, because you realize everything you've lost by living emotionally asleep for so long. It hurts to recognize how many years you've wasted playing a role that wasn't really yours. It hurts to realize how many opportunities for authentic connection you've lost by hiding behind your mask. It hurts to see how much you've hurt others through your own unconsciousness. But this pain isn't masochism. It's self-love in its rawest and most honest form. It's your psyche telling you, you deserve more than this. You deserve to live from your truth, not from your survival mechanisms. Jung had a phrase that changed my life. The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. But to exercise this privilege, you first have to go through the pain of stopping being who you're not. And that process can feel like dying and being reborn several times in the same life. We're reaching the most beautiful transformation point of this entire process. After months or years of feeling like you're losing everything, your previous identity, family relationships, superficial friendships, the comfort of unconsciousness, something magical begins to happen. You start noticing that you no longer need others' approval to feel valuable, that you can disagree without feeling guilty, that you can say no without explaining yourself for hours, that you can feel your pain without it consuming you, that you can be alone without feeling abandoned. It's as if you've developed an emotional muscle that didn't exist before. The ability to hold your own experience without needing others to validate, understand, or approve it. Jung called this the development of the mature ego, the ability to be yourself regardless of external circumstances. But the real miracle comes when you realize that by healing your own wounds, you automatically stop hurting others in the same ways you were hurt. You break generational chains of trauma without even trying consciously. When you develop the ability to be present with your own pain, you automatically develop the ability to be present with others' pain without needing to fix it or flee from it. When you learn to love yourself with all your contradictions, you automatically learn to love others with theirs. The healing process turns you into the adult you needed when you were a child. It turns you into the friend you always wanted to have. It turns you into the partner you deserve, not because you're perfect, but because you're real, conscious, emotionally available in a genuine way. And the new relationships you attract to your life are qualitatively different. They're no longer based on mutual need or functional roles, but on conscious choice and mutual appreciation. The people who are attracted to your new version don't need you to be different from who you are. They choose you specifically because you're authentic, because you have boundaries, because you know who you are and what you want. If you've made it this far with me, it's because a part of you recognizes this truth. The pain of healing isn't optional if you want to live an authentic life. It's the price of admission to an existence where you're no longer constantly betraying yourself to maintain relationships that were never real. The pain of healing is temporary, but the results are permanent. Once you've tasted the freedom of being who you really are, you can no longer return to the prison of being who others need you to be. Once you've experienced relationships based on mutual authenticity, you can no longer tolerate superficial or transactional connections. When Jung spoke of individuation, he wasn't referring to becoming perfect. He was referring to becoming whole, to integrating all parts of yourself, the light and the shadow, the strength and the vulnerability, the wisdom and the ignorance, into a coherent and authentic human being. And this wholeness isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a continuous process of choosing yourself again and again, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when it hurts, especially when no one else understands why you have to be so complicated. The pain of healing is sacred because it's the pain of birth, not physical birth, but psychological birth. It's the pain of being born as the human being you came to be instead of the one you thought you had to be to survive. So the next time you feel that healing hurts more than the original wound, remember this: you're not going backward. You're going deeper. You're not breaking. You're rebuilding yourself. You're not losing your mind. You're finding your truth. And that truth is worth every tear, every sleepless night, every relationship you have to let go, every version of yourself you have to say goodbye to. Because on the other side of this pain is the life you always knew was possible but never dared to live. The life where you no longer have to pretend to be someone else to be loved, where you don't have to hide parts of yourself to be accepted, where you can be completely present because you no longer have to be acting all the time. This is the promise that the pain of healing makes you. Not that pain will disappear forever, but that you'll develop the ability to dance with it instead of being destroyed by it. That you'll learn to use your sensitivity as a superpower instead of as a curse. That you'll discover that your vulnerability, when it's conscious and chosen, is your greatest strength. If this message has resonated with you, if you recognize your own process in these words, I want you to write in the comments, "I choose my sacred pain." Because that's exactly the choice you're making every time you decide to keep healing, despite how difficult it is. And if you know someone who's going through this process, who's questioning whether it's worth continuing with their therapy, their personal growth, share this video with that person. Because one of the most healing things we can do is remind each other that we're not crazy for choosing the difficult path toward authenticity. Subscribe to this channel if you want more content about the real side of personal growth. Activate the bell to receive notifications, and give it a like if this video has helped you understand something new about your own process. Remember, the pain of healing isn't evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're finally doing something real. And that, my dear human being in the process of transformation, is the bravest thing you can do in this life.